The thing that struck me most is I thought Penny Mordaunt. I agree with Alicia. We seemed a bit off. I thought that she's someone who's often a really good House of Commons performer. She's someone who's quite a good communicator. But I think she looked quite robotic today. She wasn't very fleet of foot.
Well, let's talk to Stefan Boscia from Politico. Stefan, you've been keeping your beady eye and ear across tonight's debate. What struck you particularly?
Evening,
Hi.
Henry. I have been watching the debate for my sins, I must say. I
For
mean,
your
what
sins.
it was a low level affair, let's be honest. I think that the thing that struck me most is I thought Penny Mordaunt. I agree with Alicia. We seemed a bit off. I thought that she's someone who's often a really good House of Commons performer. She's someone who's quite a good communicator. But I think she looked quite robotic today. She wasn't very fleet of foot. She did, she was on message discipline in a sense that she kept on hitting that £2,000 tax line and talked a bit about defence. I think that generally, I have to say, I think this some of the smaller parties probably did better tonight. I thought Stephen Flynn, the Westminster SNP leader, was really effective on his attacks on Labour, and I think that that's going to be a really important battleground, seeing what happens in Scotland. And I think Nigel Farage, yeah, did what Nigel Farage always does. He's a great communicator. He had his message. He went after the Tories quite well. I think that this is a debate overall that probably won't change too much in people's minds, but we did see some attack lines, particularly, as I said, SNP to Labour and Reform to Tories, which I think will be much more explored as we go on in this election campaign.
Yeah, I suspect people will be fact checking like mad over the next few hours and into tomorrow, in particularly some of the statistics that Penny Mordaunt came out with on crime when she said we've more than halved crime overall. And then she said if you live in a Labour area, you're more than 40% more likely to be a victim of crime than if you live in a Tory area.
Yeah, she came with a lot of statistics, including one that was actually rebutted by Michelle Hussein, the BBC moderator, who did a great job, by the way. And that was
Yes.
around, stats in the West Midlands, which actually has been controlled by a Tory mayor, Andy Street, sorry, for the last 10 years, which, Penny Mordaunt wasn't too happy to be caught up on. But we often hear this from the Conservatives. They often bring out stats that say if you take out London, for instance, crime's down. Even though they are the central government, they do control funding to police forces, even if powers are somewhat devolved. And that is something that they have to really take responsibility for, even obviously, though, as we've seen, that they're often keen to shunt off, as all political parties are at different times.
And something else that struck me was the issue of the NHS and Nigel Farage's. Well, he didn't really go into any detail apart from saying the French do it better than we do. Those who can pay opt into a social insurance scheme, and those who can't, well, they get it free at the point of need. And we simply can't afford to keep on ploughing in money because the more money you put in, the less effective the delivery. But well, how do you think that went down?
I think that that is a message that's purely tailored towards 2019 Conservative voters, people who already are probably thinking of voting reform, people who do see poor NHS results in their local areas, people who are already quite conservative and maybe, a bit older, these sort of reform target voters who may be more, willing to listen to these messages about reform of the healthcare system, who may be more willing to, go along with Farage's message about basically changing the way that healthcare works in this country and making more some people who can afford it pay. I think to the segments he's aiming for, it could be quite effective. But I think broadly in the room, it didn't seem to go down too well as we saw. And obviously all the other people on the podium were very keen to say that they do agree 100% that the NHS should always be free at the point of use for all people. And even Labour have actually seen on social media after Farage made those claims, have already put up big posters saying that Nigel Farage wants to privatise healthcare, keep a Labour attack line for many years. So it is something that clearly, I think that both parties think, in terms of reform, Labour, think they can both get something out of this.
I was also struck by the degree of hostility towards Rishi Sunak that was generated across the platform. Nearly every single one, apart from Penny Mordaunt, said that what he'd done, particularly Daisy Cooper, was deeply unacceptable. I mean, this is going to wound him, isn't it?
It is. I mean, even Penny Mordaunt said that he was wrong to do it about 4 or 5 times. She was very keen to distance herself from it. Obviously, the Prime Minister has already apologised about the decision to leave the Normandy D-Day commemorations early, and it was a very easy line for all party leaders to get in very early. I was quite surprised, actually, to be honest, though, that we had a question on defence and Angela Rayner answered first, and then I think some of the minor candidates before Nigel Farage, and he was actually the first one to attack him on it. It's as if everyone had sort of forgotten in their nerves in the debate, but once he did, with his opening answer, they all jumped on the bandwagon because I think that it is clearly something that has wounded Rishi Sunak today, and it has thrown the Conservatives into even more turmoil after a very poor week. I think that the decision for him to leave early, it looks so terrible at a time when his campaign is already sinking. I think that this is something that could actually really be remembered in years to come.
Yeah, and a real fault line on defence, which Carla Denyer of the Greens, of course, did struggle with. Well, it depends on your point of view, but clearly she wanted to say climate change is our biggest threat, not Russia or China or anybody else. Farage and Mordaunt, and even Angela Rayner saying, we've got to scale up spending 2.5%. But then Stephen Flynn and Rian Yurath are saying, well, we should be spending more on conventional weapons. A real divide there.
Yeah, it was. I think that Angela Rayner really tried to stay as close to the Tory line as possible because they want to make people understand that they're not going to change too much on defence and they don't want to scare people, especially considering their history with Jeremy Corbyn as leader and people's views about him, particularly when it came to national security defence. But I think that you're right, there is a clear dividing line between the Tories and Labour and, for instance, the SNP, who I believe don't believe in the nuclear deterrent. They certainly aim that direction. The Greens
Well, they like the jobs, but not the deterrent.
funny
Yes.
that. And so yeah, there's certainly that divide, and there has been in Parliament for some time. But it is interesting hearing, for instance, the Lib Dems, who, if you believe some polls, are projected to win up to 60 seats. So it is interesting to hear what they think about some of these issues because you don't really hear that amongst Ed Davey's many stunts. So I was interested to hear that Daisy Cooper basically said a very similar position to the main two parties. But yeah, that is clearly a divide amongst those sort of left-wing parties right now.
Sure, a couple of texts and WhatsApps have come in. Dominic and Whitby. He says, wishy-washy Rishi kept banging away about how he'd stayed for the British parts of the commemorations. Had no one told him it'd been a world war, and apart from being so insensitive to the contributions of our troops, perhaps it might have been an act of basic decency to respect the parts our allies had played and stay for the full ceremony, question mark. Thank you, Dominic. And then Mike says, Henry, you mentioned my debate comment when you chatted to Alexis before. Thank you. No, don't mention it, Mike. And he says, regarding the £2,000 line, until Labour come out with a figure to refute it, it surely stays in play. The Conservatives know Labour can't do that, so they'll just keep on at it. What do you think of, especially that comment from Mike?
Yeah, I think that the Tories, they need to just keep hitting it constantly, not worry about any sort of attacks the other way, being called liars, being called dishonest, considering that the Tories have said that it's independent figure, even though the Treasury is saying it isn't and it wasn't done by civil servants. But for them, they're just going to keep saying it over and over and over again. They want to get that message over, and they want people to think that Labour are going to raise people's taxes in a significant way because they think that over all the noise and over all the denials about it, that it may just be that what actually cuts through is that figure. And the example I'll give is during the debate, 5.5 million people watched it. And for the first 25 minutes, Keir Starmer just did not have an answer to that line about tax rises. So he eventually did, and he had quite a good response to it. But people coming away from that, the many people who watch may think, well, hang on, that seems a bit shifty. Is there something in that?
Yeah.
So even though we've had all these responses in the days afterwards, how many of those people actually pick up on that, and how many people really only see the initial attacks and think there is something in it? So I think that they do think that they can at least try to chip away at that lead with this tax attack.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Stefan. Great to talk to you tonight. Stefan Boscia from Politico. It's Henry Bonsu on Times Radio. Still to come, we will hear from Laura Trott from the Conservatives and a little bit later on from the Labour frontbencher Lisa Nandy. And we'll also get stuck into the Saturday papers